This is Kerrigan & Company. Why have a job when you can have a purpose? The Northeast Arc is now hiring ABA providers dedicated to supporting individuals with autism and related developmental disabilities. Work in a collaborative environment with room for professional growth. Northeast Arc offers generous benefits, including flexible work locations and tuition assistance. Visit ne-arc.org/careers to view job opportunities and apply. That's ne-arc.org/careers. Hi, everybody. This is Kim, a broadcast legend, joining me today to talk about some headlines. This is Kerrigan & Company.
Kerrigan & Company is here for you. Yes, Kerrigan & Company is here for you.
Welcome, everybody, to Kerrigan & Company. So great to have you with us for this very special episode. I'm very excited about the person who's keeping me company today. This is someone I've admired for a long time. I have worked with this individual. I would call this person a Boston legend, and I don't use that term lightly. And I'm hoping that he's not offended by it, because some people don't take the word legend too well. He has been inducted into the Massachusetts Broadcasting Hall of Fame, and that is just one of many accolades that he has enjoyed in three really different careers, quite frankly, and we're going to get into all of that. But many of you know him, of course, as the host of Nightside with Dan Ray on WBZ, and of course, with me today is Dan Ray. It's so good to see you.
Kim, what an introduction.
Well, listen.
You've set the bar very high there.
Dan, I got to tell you, for as long as I've known you, and I was trying to think about, when we first met. I mean,
somewhere in the last century.
Yes, somewhere in the last century, you and I came to know one another. But it was as I sort of looked through notes about you for a few minutes, because I thought I knew a lot about you, I started realizing that, Dan, you have had three careers in your lifetime that would be sustainable careers for a full lifetime, and you've had three. You are an attorney.
Yes, sir.
And you were, in a firm that had just fascinating. You represented athletes, and just really interesting.
I enjoyed my time. Yeah. I'm still a practicing lawyer, by the way. Still got the bar card.
Great.
No problem.
You were a reporter, an incredible reporter, on television on WBZ.
31 years, less 5 days, but who was counting?
And then, of course, you took this leap and decided to become a talk show host on WBZ 17 years ago, and you still feel that.
Almost 18.
So when did you take that job? When you say almost 18,
Well, it was as a consequence of the passing of David Brednoy, and shortly thereafter, David's replacement, Paul Sullivan. Right. I knew David for many years, wonderful guy. I knew Paul a little bit, great guy. And as I was wrapping up in television, having made the horrible mistake of having turned 58 years of age, Casey Stengel once said when he was fired by the Yankees as their manager after losing the 1960 World Series, he would never make the mistake of turning 70 again. So I've sold Casey's line. But they said to me, look, we need someone to fill in for Paul because he's sick. And I did it. Jordan, Rich, and I kind of handed off to a couple of days each week.
Sure.
And we assumed, Paul was going to come back. And not only he didn't, but then he passed shortly thereafter. And Peter Casey, who was the news director at WBZ, asked me if I'd like to try to do the show full time. And we've been doing it full time since, really the summer of 2007, formally since October 1st, 2007.
Right. Well, it is amazing. And I am so appreciative of the fact that you do recognize that these are three very big, sustainable careers. Let's back up for just a second. You were an attorney. And I'm trying real hard to figure out how we went from an attorney in a law firm representing athletes, and most specifically, if it's okay if I say, sure. You were representing hockey players,
yes,
right?
Absolutely. Who the best athletes of all.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. And suddenly you become a television reporter. How did that all transpire?
Well, I had a mini career before that. While I was in law school, I started to do a radio talk show on WBUR for an hour a night, an hour a week, excuse me, Monday night, 1 hour. And there was a colleague of mine, a law student, who said to me, "You like talk about politics and current events, WBUR, you can sign up and you can get an hour." And I had an hour show, which was called Radio Free Boston from 73 to 74. There came an opening for a talk show host on WBZ Radio in 1974, weekend, Saturday nights. I applied for it. I got it. I did that for 2.5 years. In the meantime, graduated from law school, passed the bar. When the people in television said, "Hey, this guy is working as a lawyer," they invited me to come over and become the legal editor.
Right.
Yeah, and so I became the legal editor of WBZ, fresh out of law school. You know everything. As you progress in your career, you better know something, but you forget all the other stuff. And so I woke up one Saturday morning, and I happened to watch the morning newscast on Saturday, and I thought, they could use a little help as a reporter. This was in the spring of 1976. And I talked with Carolyn Ween, who was the assistant news director at the time, and I said, "Do you guys need like an extra reporter in the weekend?" She said, "Yeah, would you like to do that?" I said, "Absolutely." I was the legal editor, and the great Murray Feingold was the medical editor.
Yes.
But he wasn't going to become a reporter, so I became a reporter, and that was the summer of 76. The tall ships,
wow.
Queen Elizabeth's visit to Boston, the bicentennial. So they thought I could be a reporter because it was easy. Who wouldn't presented interesting stories with those stories? And I was under contract by August, or on staff by August 1st of 76.
Wow. So there you were. By the way,
I was very lucky.
Well,
it would never happen today to anyone. I was very lucky.
That might be true, but I think there was more there than luck. You know, I have frequently thought to myself, one of the greatest assets that a reporter could have would be to be a lawyer. And I really, if I was going to go back and do something again, I might reconsider that.
You did
that,
very
and I
well.
wish I was bilingual.
Well. You did very well in your careers as well. Okay,
but I think that being a lawyer just really gives you that opportunity to see the world a little bit differently and to reason through a lot of the things that you're witnessing. And would that be the case? Would you say that's true?
But you just mentioned a key word, opportunity. In order to be successful in anything, I believe you have to have an opportunity, and then you also have to have ability. If the Celtics wanted me to play for them in my stage of life, I couldn't play for the Celtics. They could put me in every game. The guys would just run around me. You have to have the ability and then the opportunity to match. And a lot of people have the ability and they never get the opportunity. Thank God I was given the opportunity on some occasions, and I passed the bar.
You certainly did.
Not only in terms of the legal field, but also in terms of whatever the bar of competence was in TV and or radio.
How do you think it's all changed?
Well,
it's such a broad. We could be here now till next month, right? That's how I always feel.
The bean counters have won.
Yeah, they have. You're right.
They have.
You're right.
It's tough to see that. You and I worked in the golden age of local television.
Yes.
And I don't think there'll ever be another golden age. Donald Trump talks about the golden age of America. We're in the golden age of television, for real. We'll see if Donald Trump produces the golden age of America. That's still an open question. But yeah, I mean, you the places you went, the places you traveled, you could see America, you could see the world working out of a TV station in Boston as you did. Well, you worked, I think, at 3 TV stations.
I did.
Okay, I only worked at 1, so you had me beat there. But wow, what opportunity, and to meet people. I mean,
this is it.
I can count on. I need 2 hands to count the number of presidents I sat down with and interviewed: Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George Bush, Bill Clinton. Sat down with all the presidents of the United States, flew on Air Force Two. What reporters will have that opportunity?
I say this all the time. I don't know if you know this about me, Dan, but I actually had lunch in the quarters at the White House with Barbara Bush.
Wow.
I had a tuna fish sandwich there.
That's okay. That's a tuna fish sandwich you'll remember for the rest of your life. Absolutely.
But you're so right. I mean, we had such incredible. We were so lucky, and we did it, I think, with a lot of integrity. I mean, I think we all knew at the time and appreciated the opportunities we were being given, but we took it seriously.
I enjoyed meeting people who, after 30 years in television, would say, I watch you on TV, but I have no idea what you think politically. And I said, well, that's good,
right?
Because whomever I interviewed, some of the nicest people I met were people who I didn't necessarily admire politically, and some of the biggest jerks were people who I thought were terrific politically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always kind of viewed it through that lens.
Sure.
And now I can say what I want within reason. On night side.
Well, you do have to walk out in a public place, right?
Well, I also have to keep the whack jobs from the far left and the far right at bay. They all want airtime
right.
and make a speech, and I want people somewhere to the right and to the left and in the middle who can have a conversation.
Right. Have a great conversation.
That's all
with
we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
And you do that in radio as well.
I completely understand where you're coming from. I want to talk to you. We've got some great guests, so we're going to chat with our guests, but you and I are going to circle back because I want to talk to you about what I'm sure you would say was the biggest story that you ever covered, and it's so fascinating to me because I don't know of all the people that I've worked with through the years, many of whom have gone on to be correspondents, who have been our news anchors today. I've never known anybody who covered a story that had the impact that you had on a particular
story. A big
story.
payoff for these men who were victims and their families, who were victims of corrupt FBI activity.
Yeah, we're talking about the Joe Salvati story, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later
I'll be ready.
here on Kerrigan and Company. I know you will. I know you will. But in the meantime, huge story happening here in the Boston area, which has become headlines across the country. My parents live out in Missouri, and they're waiting for trial number 2 of Karen Reed.
April 1st.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about that with a woman who's referred to as America's Psychiatrist.
God, we need one.
Yeah, we need for more than just this. But she's going to be joining us right here on Kerrigan and Company. So stay with us, everybody. We'll hear from our sponsors. Dan and I will be right back. Mobsters, serial killers, movie stars, and con men. America's most notorious crimes come alive in A Nightmare with Casey Sherman, an immersive new true crime stage show coming to the Wilbur Theater on March the 26th. Join best-selling author Casey Sherman along with acclaimed actor John Fiore of The Sopranos, comic legend Steve Sweeney, and a cast of incredible actors as they take you on an immersive, terrifying journey through America's most shocking crimes. Proceeds from A Nightmare with Casey Sherman will benefit the Pete Frates Family Foundation, which supports local patients living with ALS. Get your tickets to A Nightmare with Casey Sherman coming to the Wilbur Theater on March the 26th at thewilbur.com. That's thewilbur.com. This segment of Kerrigan and Company is brought to you by Lucia Lighting and Design, where people in the know go for the best possible lighting and design experience. Welcome back, everybody, to Kerrigan and Company. So good to have you with us for this episode, and I'm so happy keeping me company today is my old friend, Dan Ray. I shouldn't say old friend. I hate it when people say that to me. I don't mean that. You know that, right? My longtime friend.
But it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. I am older than about everybody.
No, I mean my longtime friend. So great to have you here. You know, you and I have chatted a bit off the air. We talked on the phone the other day, and we were talking about this Karen Reed case. Of course, the second trial coming up April 1st. I want to admit this out loud. I was intrigued by it, but not mesmerized the way so many people have been. And I think you kind of said the same thing, right?
Absolutely. I haven't followed it like the folks who are out there picketing and demonstrating. And frankly, I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
And maybe there are smarter people than me that can figure this one out.
Well, I'm anxious to see what our next guest has to say.
I have a theory, but
right. Well, and we'd love to hear your theory as well. But this is America's Psychiatrist, if you will. She's a forensic psychiatrist. We have seen her many times on Court TV and many other locations. This is Dr. Carol Lieberman. She's been following this case, and it's good to see you, Doctor. Thanks so much for being a part of Kerrigan and Company today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Are you surprised, because you cover a lot of these cases that catch the public's eye and they just sort of get, as I've used the term, mesmerized. Are you surprised that this is one of those cases?
Yes and no. I mean, probably if there weren't as many protesters out there, it wouldn't have gotten as much attention. this is, for me, of course, I paid attention to it. But what the overriding emotion, I guess, that I have is frustration that people don't see that she's guilty. After she, now I don't mean guilty.
Don't be ambivalent. Now, tell us what you really think.
That's great.
I'm sorry.
I said, don't be ambivalent. Tell us what you really think.
Yes. Well, I thought I would lay it out there right
I'm glad
front.
you did.
Yes.
I don't think that, I'm not saying that this was premeditated murder. Mm-hmm. I don't think she got up in the morning and said to herself, I'm going to kill John today. But she was very angry at him, and she was angry at him for a while, as evidenced by her texts that she sent to him and her messages, voicemail messages, and so on. She was very jealous of him. They had gone to Aruba just recently, and he was flirting with someone, or she interpreted it that he was flirting. And she was really angry, and she was worried that he was going to be dumping her and all that. So unconsciously, she did want to kill him. She was in a rage. And that night they had been drinking. She was drinking, estimates are between 5 and 9 drinks in a relatively short amount of time. So she was drunk. There's no question about that when she hit him. Now, so I don't think she knew consciously that she hit him. But then it was interesting that the next morning, when she woke up and he wasn't there, she was very, very worried, like more worried than one would normally be if someone just didn't come home. So I think unconsciously she did know that she hit him and that he may be dead. But so I think that at the time that she backed into him, that she was unconscious, listening to her unconscious and expressing her rage at him. And, the thing is, there was more than one person. I think there were 3 or 4 people who testified that they heard her say, I hit him. What more do you have to find somebody guilty? She said it right then.
Dan, did you?
Well, yeah, my question is, I don't know what happened, but your theory is kind of close to what my theory is. And my theory goes just a little longer, a little deeper, maybe, or maybe you'll agree or disagree. He wants to go into a house and have some nightcaps after all the drinking. She doesn't want to, obviously. So I'm assuming that there probably was some words exchanged when she drove him to the home. He gets out of the car, and maybe they had been sitting in the car for a few minutes or whatever, and she had the car in reverse and forgot that the car was in reverse. And after he got out of the car, there was probably some bad words back and forth, as can happen, and she probably figured, I'm just going to peel out of here and symbolically go forward and race off. But she wasn't in drive, and she went backwards. That's how I think it happened. So I don't think that she had any intention, mens rea. I'm a lawyer, so I would look at that. I don't think there's any proof that she intended in her mind to strike him with the back of the vehicle, but that could explain what happened, in my opinion. That anger, frustration, I'm getting out of here, vroom, boom, my God. Maybe she thought she hit a mailbox and she didn't think him, or maybe she hoped she hit the mailbox and not him and left.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with what you're saying, other than that I think that her, a very powerful aspect of it is that unconsciously she was so angry at him, right, she would have wanted to kill him. I think the difference is you're saying that not even unconsciously.
No, I'm saying it's a manslaughter case at best. It's not a second-degree murder case.
Dr. Carol Lieberman is with us. Doctor, let me advance this just a bit, and let me ask you about this coming up again, April the 1st. You saw the first go-round. What did these two sides have to do differently for one of them to win?
Well, for one thing, Alan Jackson needs to keep his hands off her. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I have no idea what you're talking about, by the way. Well, don't expand on it.
Well,
I was surprised he came back, to be honest. Mm-hmm. That should have been so humiliating when he was pictured, photographed, holding her in a restaurant, with his arms basically touching her breast. He had his arms around her, and one of his arms was touching her breast. And so, I don't know if it's courageous or whatever that he came back, or he had to, or whatever. But anyhow, so one thing would be to not get into any kinds of situations like that. Another thing is for them to tone her down a bit. This is, of course, for the defense side, to tone her down a bit. She was acting like she was some Hollywood celebrity. Whenever she would come in and out and the media was there, she was like loving it. It was her opportunity to shine, or so she thought. Like she was some hero. And of course, that's because they had, all the people were there saying free Karen Reed and all that. Another thing, for both sides is I think that the jury should be sequestered. Now, I know that that's really a hardship because the trial went on 6 or 8 weeks, something like that. It's hard for somebody to be sequestered that long. But at the very least, then they should be made to meet at a certain place far enough from the court and then taken by bus to the back side of the court, a roundabout way so that they don't see all the people in the front of the court with the signs and yelling, free Karen Reed.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
And then the prosecutors should prep their witnesses better. I'm an expert witness, so I'm very involved with all of this, a psychiatric expert witness. So they need to prep their witnesses better. The witnesses for the prosecution were really not great. And I'm not saying they should tell them to lie, of course, but they need to kind of get their act together. And what else? Those are the main things.
There's a different prosecutor in this trial, a guy named Hank Brennan, who's a really good attorney, someone who I know and I respect immensely. He's the defense attorney who's been hired by the county to be the prosecutor.
Right.
That could be a significant difference in how this is played.
Yes. Another interesting thing, and I don't quite know how this was resolved. I saw part of the pre-trial motions, but the company that was doing the accident reconstruction, ARCCA, ARCA.
Yes.
The prosecution found, and this was pretty wild, that the defense had been in contact, had been back and forth in significant contact with this accident reconstruction firm who testified, and it seemed like it was inappropriate. That they were paying their expert witness fees. I don't know. The whole thing seemed very smelly, and the judge, I know, was really upset about it. I don't know how she ruled though on it.
I don't think she has not ruled on it. I don't think she's made a decision about it.
I don't think that they have been prohibited from testifying in a second trial.
Exactly. Doctor, let me ask you, we're running out of time here, but let me ask you one final question. And that would be, I thought it was really interesting. You said they need to tone her down a bit. Do you think that the jurors were taking in her reactions, her smirking, her laughing, her flirting, her, all these things that we saw at the witness table? Do you think they were taking that in? And why do you think that didn't bode poorly for her?
Yes, good question. Yes, of course, they always look at the defendant very carefully to try to catch, little things that the defendant isn't paying attention to, or unprepared, where the defendant isn't like and prepare isn't. Why am I having trouble finding the word?
You're talking about like
what they're doing,
but you're talking about sort of like a tell.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. The judge, in fact, pointed that out at least once. And you would have thought that the jury would. Now, the jury was kind of confused because, they found her not guilty on 2 of the charges. And then, of course, her defense team wanted to get those charges dismissed. Right. And that was the second-degree murder and the leaving the scene. Now, I don't know how you find her not guilty of leaving the scene, but in any case. So this time she still has
I could
all three
reconcile
charges.
that for you.
And
I could reconcile that for you if my theory is accurate, and
Right. She didn't
I'm
think
not
it was
saying
a
it is.
scene.
So she didn't think it was him. She oh my God, I'm in reverse. I must have knocked over the post. He'd been out of the car for 20 seconds. He must have been halfway. Let me get out of here.
Yes. If she really didn't know, I mean, I guess that's where our assessments of what she
Sure.
was thinking changed
Sure.
are different. But the jury kind of seemed to be confused altogether. They didn't know that they could find her guilty of just one charge. So I don't know. I'm hoping that they do a better job of picking a jury this time. But let's be honest.
Or
one
better
of the things
or
that
better
influenced the
jury
jury
instructions.
was that
Right.
what?
Or better jury instructions. The
Right.
judge could have inquired
yes,
if she had
yes,
wanted to.
yes.
Are you hung up on all three counts? And if the foreperson, I think it was the foreman, said yes, fine. If he said, well, not actually,
Right.
they might have been able to proceed and say, go
Yes.
back and give us the verdict slip and all of that.
Well, they
and
didn't
let's make it
poll the
official.
jury then after it was over either.
Well, there was no reason to poll them. I mean,
Because they
and
thought
of
it
course,
was-
the defense did not make a motion. They were thrilled with a hung jury.
Sure.
Second bite at the apple generally helps the defense. Generally.
Yes, you're right. The jury instructions and all of that should have been. I mean, if they would have clarified that, we wouldn't be having a second trial.
Right.
So maybe that it was important. But one thing we have to mention also, that even though she was smirking and looking like why do I have to be here kind of thing, this is boring. She was also very cute. We have to admit, come on, she was cute. Mm-hmm. And then also when one of the witnesses, when they were reading, I think it was Proctor, when he was reading his text, and he had said something really awful about her that was so embarrassing because she had this gastrointestinal problem and so on. And I think they kind of felt sorry for her. So that's the only thing that I can think of for why. Well, not the only thing. I mean, I was saying the witnesses for the prosecution weren't well prepared and all that. There were a number of things, but I hope that this is going to go much more smoothly and clearly.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Carol Lieberman, we are going to start to watch it April 1st. And when it's all said and done, or maybe as we get through portions of it, we could have you back to chat about how you think it's progressing. Thank you so much for being a part of Kerrigan & Company today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. This is Kerrigan & Company. Well, we did it. We survived another New England winter. As the days get longer, it's time to plan ahead and think about landscape and outdoor lighting. My friends at Lucia Lighting and Design in Lynn can help you get your landscape and outdoor living spaces ready for summer. They'll work with you to plan a space that's well lit, comfortable, and secure. After all, outdoor lighting is like adding a room to your home. Get started by going to lucialighting.com and then make an appointment to visit their beautiful showroom in Lynn, Massachusetts. That's lucialighting.com.
Have you tried Rumson Rum yet? This smooth, sweet, memorable rum is distilled in the Caribbean, barreled aged, and then blended, finished, and bottled in Salem, Massachusetts. Rumson's offers 4 unique blends: Gold, Spice, Grand Reserve, and Coffee. Before you start to sip or mix your next cocktail, ask yourself, do I want to enjoy New England's most awarded rum brand? If the answer is yes, the answer is Rumson's. Get Rumson's rum at liquor stores or ask for it by name at your favorite restaurant. Rumson's. Life lived, life enjoyed.
Celebrate inclusion and have a blast doing it at the Northeast Arc's annual Evening of Changing Lives Gala. I'm thrilled that I'll be returning to MC this event at Encore Boston Harbor. I hope you'll join me on Tuesday, April the 8th, to support an organization that helps people with disabilities live as fully included members of their community. The event features a cocktail reception and an inclusive fashion show. Visit ne-arc.org/gala to buy tickets and explore sponsorship opportunities. That's ne-arc.org/gala. Welcome back, everybody, to Kerrigan & Company. Great to have you with us. And keeping me company today is Dan Ray, of course, the host of Nightside with Dan Ray over on WBZ radio. Been there for 17 years. But Started his
17 and a half.
I'm sorry, 17 and a half. And he was at WBZ TV for 31 years and 5 days, but no one is counting.
Yeah, less 5 days.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't quite make
I can't
31.
get this right, Dan.
I know. No. You're doing a great job. Heard Monday through Friday night, 8 to midnight
Absolutely.
on WBZ, 10:30 a.m.
Absolutely. There you go. Perfect. Exactly. And in all seriousness, don't miss the show. It's great. It's a great show. I've loved it for years. That's for sure.
Thank you.
So Dan, we've been talking about headlines. Obviously, we were talking about the Karen Reed case. You were part of one of the biggest stories and one of the biggest headlines in the Boston area, in Boston media. And it happened back in the early 90s, meaning the coverage of it. The actual incident that we're talking
65.
about happened in 65. So we're talking about the John Salvati case.
Joe Salvati.
Joe, I'm sorry. Oh, boy. I'm having some
A lot of
troubles
names here. A lot of names here. Involved the
it.
murder of a guy named Teddy Deegan, who was a small-time hoodlum who made a terrible mistake. He was breaking into homes that were owned by mafioso people. Had basically signed his own death warrant.
Sure. Yeah. So he ends up murdered in an alley.
In a really nasty alley.
Yep.
In Chelsea.
And in Chelsea, right. And suddenly a group of gentlemen are arrested for having done it.
2.5 years later.
2.5 years later. So walk me through, maybe without getting into too many names, because I think that gets confusing for people, but walk us through what happened there.
So let me give you the Cliff Notes version.
Sure.
Hopefully. And we can maybe fill in some blanks if you want. So murders in 65 goes unsolved until 1967, when a guy named Joe Barboza, who was a long-time gangster, nicknamed the Animal, appropriately so, was grabbed by some FBI agents with machine guns in the back of his trunk of his car. So they basically gave him a deal that he couldn't refuse, which was, we're going to put you away for life, or you're going to help us on a couple of cases. So they were looking, the FBI agents, Paul Rico specifically, was looking to make his bones. He was considered Hoover's favorite FBI agent, and he basically said to Barboza, we're interested in a guy named Henry Tomelio and a guy named Peter Limoni. And is there a crime that maybe you could tell us about? And he remembered the Deegan murder, which he and his team had committed. So all he did was he took his guys out and put in the guys the FBI wanted, and he said, oh, by the way, there's a couple of guys I wanted to throw in. One is a guy named Louis Greco, who beat me up one time, and I've never forgiven him for that. And another guy who beat me for some money named Joe Salvati, and he was the guy whose cause I championed after Victor Garrow, his lawyer, Joe Salvati's lawyer, had beaten his head against the wall for 15 or so years. And that's how the case started. It ended...
well, we want to just make it clear. Those guys came to trial, and they all were convicted, and they all went to jail.
All went to jail. A couple of them were sentenced to death. And because Furman versus Georgia overturned the death penalty nationwide in 1972, they were spared the death penalty.
Wow.
But two of them, Tomelio and Greco, died during their imprisonment. So the four men served a total of 109 years combined. And Limoni was in for 33, Salvati was in for 30. And we got Salvati out a little early, so that's why he was 30, and Limoni came out when everything exploded.
Yeah.
And very rarely do you prove people are innocent. You sometimes can prove they're not guilty.
Right.
But to prove that they were innocent of this trial, that's why at the end of the day, they won $116 million, which they got from the federal government for what these corrupt FBI agents did to these men and their families.
Now, let me just ask a couple questions along the way, and we'll keep moving down this timeline. The first thing is that, as you said, Rico was, trying to cut his chops here, but Hoover also wanted to go after mobsters, so this was a big deal for him in Washington as well. And when push came to shove, when it was all said and done, it was pretty well proved that Hoover knew all this was going on. Yes?
Yeah, we had There was an assistant U.S. attorney named John Durham who investigated the FBI and found what were called airtels, today would be emails, from the corrupt agents in Boston, making Hoover aware of how this investigation was proceeding. They actually knew in advance that Deegan was going to be killed. And they let Barboza, the FBI let Barboza kill Deegan because it's just a collateral damage.
Wow.
As Judge Nancy Gertner responded to what was going on.
Okay.
And this is all in the 60s, 70s, into the 80s. By the time I jump in the case in 93, people are aware that there's something rotten in Denmark.
Sure.
And we were able to kind of link Rico and Condon, and when they retired, to John Conley and other FBI agents. And I've often said to people, just think of three spurs on a railroad line, 3 spurs. So, and you have the corrupt agents, you have the corrupt informants who were working with the agents, and then on the third rail you have the victims. Yeah. And you step to the side and you say, okay, it's year 1965. Who are the individuals? 1970. The cast sometimes changed a little bit, but the scam continued.
Absolutely. Let's go to Joe Salvati.
Yes.
Just quickly, he was not a known gangster. He wasn't running with these guys. He made a mistake and borrowed some money at some point.
The worst that Joe would have been, and Joe probably would not be offended by me saying this, was kind of a guy in the North End. Yeah. Do I think he might have run some numbers at some point in his life? I'm not surprised. Yeah. Do I think he might have been a bouncer when he was a young guy at an after-hour club? That was the North End in the 60s, and of course even into the 70s and 80s. No, he was not at the level of Peter Lamoni or Henry Temelio. Those were the guys who were the number 2 people below Angiulo and Patriarca.
Yeah. So we fast forward to the 90s, and Salvati's his attorney is just beating his head against the wall. He knows this guy is innocent, and he decides that he's got to have a media partner in this to expose some of this. And he chooses you.
Well, I think he called Ron Cass, who was the dean of the Boston University Law School, from which both Victor and I graduated, not at the same time. Victor was a few years ahead of me. And Ron Cass said, well, let me set you up with the meeting with Dan Ray. Cass summoned me to the office. I went to the meeting. Victor Garrow convinced me that there was at least some questions here about whether they had received justice or whether or not their rights were observed. This is not a case where some police officer opens the trunk of a car and sees kilos of cocaine, and even though the guy's as guilty as sin of having kilos of cocaine, the judge says, you didn't have a search warrant when you opened the trunk of that car, and therefore that evidence is thrown out. So that person might actually have had the kilos of cocaine, but he's acquitted, probably in emotion. This was a case where these guys were framed by FBI agents with the assistance of Barboza, who, by the way, after he was convicted for a murder while he was in the Federal Witness Protection Program, the FBI buried him at a federal farm in Montana. He spent about 3.5 years up there cooling his heels, and then miraculously he was given a sentence of 5 years to life, and he served 3.5 years. It was called a California sentence at the time. But the real sentence was when he was returned to the streets of San Francisco, he died in an industrial accident. What I mean is that the FBI was smart enough to make sure they didn't want to kill him. All they did was let the mafia in Boston know where Barboza was living. And in February of 1975, he, as they say, died in an industrial accident. He was machine gunned to death. It's an industrial accident when you're in that business.
Of course it is. Absolutely.
Yeah, sad.
So
sad,
let me ask you. Yeah, not sad.
No.
Karma, right?
Karma. Barboza had killed about 40 or 50 people in his career.
He was a hitman. He was just a hitman, right?
If you looked at him the wrong way,
I'm sure. I can only imagine. I can only imagine. And what was so fascinating, you said to me, is that he was the
prototype.
The prototype for
the Federal Witness Protection Program. And he killed a guy in California while he was in Santa Rosa, California, in the Federal Witness Protection Program. A guy named Clay Wilson, which is another story. But and the FBI agents from Boston went there to appear at the trial as character witnesses for Barbosa, with the argument that he had done such good work eliminating mafioso here in Boston, he had reason to be a fear of his life.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
He pled guilty, and they gave him the sentence 5 to 12, 5 to life.
Yeah.
And
served his 3 and
3.5,
out.
and then had a bad morning in San Francisco.
Apparently so. Coming back to Boston in the early 90s, and you got involved in this case, let me ask you, how did you convince the folks at WBZ that this would be a good idea for you to spend time doing this?
It wasn't easy.
I'll bet it wasn't. I've thought about that so many times. And you started airing, your updates, and they stood behind you while you aired these updates.
For the most part.
On WBZ TV. Right?
Oh, I kept at it. I'm a bulldog on something like this. I was convinced. Originally I thought, Salvati and these guys didn't get a fair trial. Then I realized it was a little worse than that.
Yeah.
They were framed by Barbosa and FBI agents.
The FBI,
and,
right.
as they say, the whole story is long and involved. It involves politicians. It involves FBI agents. It involves. It was
just corruption.
Well, it was the way business was conducted. It was corrupt, but it was accepted at the time. And I often think, I'm going to be really honest, I've never said this publicly before, but I'll say it to you. I often think if I had graduated from law school a few years earlier, I graduated from law school in the mid-'70s, if I graduated a few years early and had been in the Suffolk County DA's office at the time when this came across our desk, would have I had the courage and the integrity to say, wait a second, hold it.
Right.
These guys, they may be bad guys. Salvati wasn't a bad guy, but these other guys may have fairly significant criminal records, but they didn't commit this crime. You don't convict people for crimes they didn't commit, even though they happen to be bad guys. I would like to think I would have done the right thing and probably been fired from the office, but I don't know what pressure all of these folks. I remember talking to the prosecutor in the case, Jack Zalkind, who became a lawyer. He told me, he said, Dan, if I had seen the police report, I discovered this police report, the original. He says, I never would have handled the case. Now, was Jack telling me the truth? I believe he was, but... Well,
do you think that a lot of people, and I asked you this and I'll ask you again, a lot of people ran scared while they were trying to do this? I mean, didn't you feel moments where you were looking over your shoulder?
I checked my rearview mirror driving home some night a little more often than normal, but no, I wasn't.
Really?
Because I just thought that, look, I know what the truth is. I came to understand the truth when I peeled all the leaves off this conspiracy. And I'm a journalist. I'm a lawyer. This is why I went to law school.
Right.
Another journalist probably might have looked at it and said, this is really too complicated. I don't want to take on the FBI.
I believe that's 100% true. I think that's absolutely true.
And I had friends of mine in law enforcement. Well, it was funny. I had more support in law enforcement than I had in any sector. I had more people in my own newsroom, friends of mine who are friends to this day, who apologized to me later and said, Dan, I doubted you on this.
Yeah.
And they felt, I didn't know they had. One camera guy, we interviewed Salvati after his sentence was commuted, and we stopped for coffee. I'm not going to say his name. And he looked at me and he said, I owe you an apology. I had no idea what he was talking about. He said, I thought you had gone over to the dark side.
Yeah.
And he said, I lost respect for you, and I never should have. And he was almost tears in his eyes. It was a moment. This was a friend of mine.
Sure, absolutely.
And there were others who never apologized.
I'm sure that's true. Could that ever happen again?
Sure.
You think both things could happen again?
Well, not necessarily.
You think that we could have corruption like that again?
Well, I think we had corruption when James Comey was the head of the FBI, to be honest with you. I think who was the lovebirds in the FBI, I forget their name, that they went after Trump unfairly. Convict him, but convict him of something that he is guilty of.
Right.
Don't.
Right.
And there were politics in the FBI, and I hope that Trump doesn't turn around and use the FBI for his political purposes.
Sure.
And I hope that part of his legacy would be that the FBI got cleaned up and got back to the days of Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. that we all grew up watching the FBI. Hoover, have you seen the movie Hoover with Leo DiCaprio?
Yes.
I mean, that was a very complex man.
Yes, very much
like
so.
that, okay?
That's a good way to put it. A very complex person. It's a fascinating story, Dan. I mean, I could just sit and listen to you forever and ever.
We're working on a movie.
Are you? Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Yeah. Good. Well, I'm going to be in the front row when that comes out.
I'll buy you a ticket for
All right. It's a deal. Listen, we're going to take a break. Dan and I are going to come back. I'm going to ask him a couple of rapid fire questions. You know, we love the Fast Five here. This is Kerrigan and Company. Spring is sprung, and for many of us, that means finally coming out of hibernation. Soon there'll be the graduation parties and the weddings to attend, so why not get your skin ready for all the fun right now? Our friends at Sienna Aesthetic Spa in Beverly have some great springtime specials. Buy 2 hydrofacials and you'll get the second treatment half off. And if you book a Botox treatment after your facial, each Botox unit is only $11. Don't wait, book your treatment today. Go to SiennaAesthetics.com. That's SiennaAesthetics.com. This segment of Kerrigan and Company is brought to you by Sienna Aesthetics Medical Spa. Take years off your face with the very latest technologies at Sienna Aesthetics in Beverly. Welcome back, everybody. Boy, we've had a great time talking with Dan Ray about a story that is that's an amazing story, Dan. What a legacy you've left with, here in Boston with that. I mean, that is just,
thank you very much.
It's amazing. And again, we could spend the next 2 weeks just sitting here gabbing about all the...
We've just scratched the surface.
I know we have. You know what's amazing to me? I was a huge fan of The Sopranos. That was real stuff.
Oh, yes. Oh, sure.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
Goodfellas.
Yeah, right.
Goodfellas.
Right. We all think that was a Hollywood fiction. Well, not based in some real truth. Huh? You saw it firsthand, that's for sure. We do this thing here called Fast Five. It's just 5 rapid questions. You have to answer them within 30 seconds. We want to see... just decided, Dan Ray, that maybe we don't get to see very often. So if you're ready,
I'm ready,
here we go.
Okay.
3, 2, and 1. What's your favorite snack food?
Oh, anything that's chocolate, brownies, and chocolate chip cookies, absolutely.
What kind of animal was your first pet, and what was its name?
First pet was a dog that I bought for my daughter, Charlie, the Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, my best friend in the world for 10 years, who I end every show with on Nightside, all dogs, all cats, all pets go to heaven. That's where my pal Charlie is.
Oh, that is so sweet.
It's true. And everyone else's pets is there too. If our pets aren't there, is heaven really going to be worth it?
Yeah, you're so right. If you had to appear on a reality TV show, what would that show be?
Oh, I don't know. I'd like to think right now, Tracker. Have you ever watched Tracker?
I have.
My new favorite TV show on Sunday nights.
So you'd like to turn that into a reality show where you go out and track down those who are missing.
Kind of what I did in a different way.
You're right.
Okay.
Would you rather travel to the past or would you rather go to the future?
Past.
Why?
Because I think I lived at a great time professionally. You had lived at the same time. Yep. I don't think those talents that you and I had, I had a lot more than talent as an anchor person for some great stations. That's never going to be appreciated. We hit it right.
Yeah,
we hit it
you're
right.
Probably right. And what object do you misplace or lose the most?
Oh, my glasses. Okay, not my car keys, because I always want to have a quick getaway, but my glasses.
You always know where theirs are.
Yes.
Well, I have gotten smart enough to now put a set in almost every single room. So even if I thought I lost them, I find another set. So
those are the $20 cheaters.
the readers.
But it's still just the aggravation of having to go to figure out what does 2.75 mean, or what one looks good. Yeah, it's too much to bear.
It is. You're absolutely right. It has been a delight having you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
Keeping me company. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it more than I ever could have imagined.
And let's tell everybody again, it's Nightside with Dan Ray. You can hear it on WBZ Radio every night from 8 to
midnight.
12.
Monday through Friday.
And
there's a special best of on Sunday nights, and they can find me on Twitter. They can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and they can give us ideas for guests. some of my best guests are people who say, I read this book, or that you should talk about this person. Recently had on the new U.S. Attorney, Leah Foley, for an hour. She was a great guest. You should have her on here.
Yeah, she's great.
She was really very, very smart. Very
Fantastic. Good. Dan, thank you. Continued success, my friend.
To you as well.
Thank you very
You're killing
much.
it. You're knocking it out of the park. Keep batting. Okay?
Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for listening or watching. Be sure you check us out on Instagram and anywhere else that you follow social media. And when you do go to YouTube, be sure you subscribe. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody, for listening to Kerrigan and Company. To find out who will keep me company and be my co-host on the next episode, be sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok. Kerrigan and Company is recorded at the Big Night Studios at the TD Garden in Boston. You can view the podcast on YouTube and listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure you tell a friend. The executive producer of Kerrigan and Company is David Thompson. Our engineer is Peter Hurley, and our social media managers are Grace Kerrigan, Colby Thompson, and Riley Thompson. See you next time.